If you recently joined a Toastmasters club and you're finding it hard to approach people, make small talk, or just generally socialize with the rest of the members, here are 5 quick things that help you do just that. Now, of course, if you're finding it hard to socialize with people, even in a one-to-one conversation, it can also be very well possible that you're nervous to give your first speech in front of the entire club. In that case, the first step that can be taken is to start taking up small roles. The role of the timer, our counter, grammarian are simple things that help us get more used to the stage and help us become more familiar with the club. And more importantly, it helps the club become more familiar with us. As we take up more roles, as we show up more often, people will start to approach us on their own. The second point is to nominate yourself to become part of the executive committee at your club. Now, if you're not sure what that is and what roles can you be nominated for, we've written an entire article on that, linked in the description below. When I was in the XCOM, it really helped me bond a lot with the rest of my team members, and it also made me a more familiar face in the club. People would approach me, ask me questions, and it made the process of making small talk a lot easier. And as I kept showing up for more meetings and helping more people out, my social anxiety automatically reduced. Now, if you're very nervous to take up even any of these roles, or if the nominations are not close by for the executive community, how do you make small talk and socialize with the club members then? One of the easiest things that I found myself doing was simply seeing other speakers give their speeches and then complimenting them at the end of the meeting. And by the time the next meeting would come around, that speaker would already know my face and it would become easier to start a conversation with him or her. This worked incredibly well. It helped me get a lot closer to a lot of people. It helped other people feel good because you're starting off any sort of interaction with a compliment, and it just made me feel less anxious being around so many unfamiliar people. Taking on from that point, the next thing that we can do is to simply ask people for advice. If we see some senior members who either we feel that they're very experienced as public speakers or they've just been around in Toastmasters for a while, we can go up to them and ask them certain questions, any doubts that we might be having, and we can even make them up just to strike up a conversation. Having a reason or a question like that makes ourselves feel a lot more comfortable to approach somebody in the first place, as opposed to just going up and saying hi. Before I gave my first speech, I approached so many senior members, just asking them things like, hey, so I want to give my first speech, but I'm very nervous to go in front of people. Do you have any advice for somebody like me? Or I would just ask them general questions about Toastmasters or about their journey and what they've learned so far, and whether they have any advice for someone new like me. And lastly, if none of these approaches are working, in Toastmasters, when you join in most clubs, you're assigned a mentor. This mentor is usually a senior Toastmasters member, and the mentor will act as somebody who will tell you about the meeting processes. And if we can form a good relationship with the mentor, they themselves can introduce us to other members of the club. And by having just one familiar face with us can make it a lot easier to reduce that social anxiety and be more social in these meetings. Now, leaving all these tips aside, the very best thing to do is to just start giving more and more speeches. The more we can go on stage, the more familiar we'll get with the club as well as our own fears, and the faster we'll be able to reduce our social anxiety. So if you're considering giving your first Toastmasters speech, which is the icebreaker, and want some tips and guidance on how to go about that, we've made an entire extensive video on that, which you can check out right here.